Pretty cool.
Pass it around. This is what it looks like. This is what it looks like. You've arrived. Oh, there was a probation period that we were supposed to cover that? I had lots to say. Just kidding. We will bring the regular assembly meeting to order for November 13th, 2023. Mr. Bryson, will you lead us in the flag salute?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Well, Hagadoc, would you lead us in the land? Well, would you say the land acknowledgement? I guess we could all say it together.
Yes. We would like to acknowledge that the city and borough of Juneau is on Tlingit land and wish to honor the indigenous people of this land. For more than 10,000 years, Alaska Native people have been and continue to be integral to the well-being of our community. We are grateful to be in this place, a part of this community, and to honor the culture, traditions, and the resilience of the Tlingit people. Bunashish.
Thank you, Hagadoc. Madam Clerk, will you call roll?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Ms. Atkinson.
Here.
Mr. Kelly.
Here.
Walakidok.
Here.
Ms. Wall.
Present.
Mr. Smith.
Here.
Ms. Hughes Candies is absent. Mr. Bryson.
Present.
Ms. Hale.
Here.
And Mayor Weldon.
Here.
The quorum is present.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. So our special order of business tonight is introduction of our exchange students we have in town. So are you Amelia? You want to bring them up and they're going to introduce themselves. Hello. I'm here with you. If I stand up in front of everybody, you guys do too. So you may say something, but we'd like them to introduce themselves. And our question for them to the day is, what has surprised you the most of being here? Do you want to say anything about them before we start?
So I'm Noel, and I'm. Wait, do I have to present? Okay. I'm Noel, and I'm from Germany. I'm 17 years old, and I go to Thunder Mountain. And I think that surprised me the most is that how open and like welcoming people here are. So when I'm like at school, just like wandering around, like people come up to me and talk to me, and they come up to me and say like, "Hey, you're that German guy, right?" And then, and yeah.
Good evening. My name is Kamormania, but I go by Nisha. And I am. Oops.
Okay.
Okay, good evening. My name is Hava Begim, but I go by Nisha, and I study at Juno Douglas High School, and I turned 18 today. Um, yeah, thank you. Thanks. What surprised me here the most is like people are very welcoming, and the school is very different, and I like this type of school. Like more practice in here than theory, as we learn in our schools, and this like prepares more for future life. Yeah. My name is Abanya Sieber, and I'm 17 years old. I'm from Switzerland, and I also go to Thunder Mountain High School. And what surprised me the most was also how nice the people here are and how open, and that in school the sports are included into the school, and we don't have to go to sport clubs outside of the school.
You're not off the hook yet. Okay. Our last question is, what's your favorite American food so far?
Salmon. Like basically like lasagna. I'm not sure if it's American, but maybe yeah. Yeah, and like I like everything.
I like the hamburgers, and like from Juno, I like Pels.
Do you have any questions for us? No, run, quick, run. All right, well, in America, we sing happy birthday. So her name was Nisha, so everybody join. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Nisha. Happy birthday to you. And the last tradition we have is if you come up here, you have to do the handshake. So you start with this young lady and you work your way all the way down to that man and shake hands with everybody.
I just wanted to let everybody know that the Bryson family has the privilege. Ronya will be joining our household, I believe, in February or March, and my wife and I will be one of the host families for Ronya when she gets in the spring.
Well, great job, and she'll get to meet the parent. So, again, welcome. You don't have to stay any further, but you're welcome to stay as much as you want. So, anyway, that brings us to, and I should say that Madam City Manager was an exchange student herself when she was a kid, and she'll show you a lovely picture of herself someday. Anyway, so that brings us to our approval of minutes. Ms. Wall.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move the Assembly approve the February 1st, 2023 Special Joint Assembly Meeting 2023-04 with BRH Board draft minutes, and I ask for unanimous consent.
Any objection? And I know that Ms. Hale had one slight typographical error to fix, so. All right, seeing that, minutes are approved. Ms. Manager, do you have a request for agenda changes?
No agenda changes.
All right, that brings us to public participation on non-agenda items. Give the clerk a moment to walk to the back because we have none that have signed up ahead of time on Zoom. Thank you, Madam Clerk. First of all, we have Mr. Shaw. So if you would come up and state your name and area of town you live in, and you have 3 minutes. Madam Clerk, will you time?
There we go. My name is Albert Shaw. I'm a resident of the city a long time. Anyhow, I'm here this evening to ask the assembly to talk to the city manager and attorney and start the process to put incinerators at Lemon Creek in cooperation with Alaska Waste. It looks like there are incinerators that meet EPA standards. They're not going to be cheap, but we created the problem. We need to solve it. And if we got to kick money in the pot, that's the way it is. And I don't know how you get around it. We could also include the ships. We can control the harbor. Simply tell them, we'll take your garbage and you'll pay us. And there's nothing wrong with that. You know, beyond that, assuming the numbers come in good after this is investigated, definitely go to a vote. I'll have nothing to do with a smoke-filled backroom decision, period. That's absolutely out of my line of sight. And I will gladly work with you and the administration to make this work. There was an assembly member quite a few years ago, everything with me is quite a few years ago now, who did some initial work on incinerators that met EPA standards. He couldn't get the rest of the assembly to be interested. But it's long past the time to take that and start the process. There's several aspects of this. What do you do with the ash? I'm sure the people who built this can answer all sorts of questions as to how they operate and what you do with the residue afterwards. I mean, I don't think in any of this we're going to be reinventing the wheel. So there you go. It's going to require some type of increase in fees or taxes, but that's the way it is. Beyond that, here I am again asking you to start the process to annex the northern part of Admiralty Island from Hawk Inlet north. I've been working on it for 60 years. That's longer than most people have lived who sit in this room right now. So, but I don't give up. So there we go. The whole business on the garbage, there was an award a number of weeks ago to people who did a lot of pickup. The problem with that is it's like sweeping the floor and sweeping the dirt under the rug. Nothing went away. It just got piled in a different place. Thank you very much for your time. Any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Shaw. Any questions for Mr. Shaw? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony tonight. Always a pleasure.
Thank you.
Next, we have Mark Whitman. Please state your name and area of town you live in for the record, and you have 3 minutes.
Mark Whitman from Douglas. Mayor Weldon, members of the Assembly.
Oops, you just turned your mic off.
Mayor Weldon, members of the Assembly, my name is Mark Whitman, residing in Douglas, and I want to thank you for a chance to speak. My focus is Telephone Hill, just as I saw it this morning from the Douglas waterfront, one tight hyphen of green and a cluster of tall buildings around it. Telephone Hill has always been the pivot point of Juneau's waterfront cove, the central spot from which our shared history has played out fairly and unfairly. The green heart from which all things have been measured, surveyed, and lived out. Measured geologically, historically, politically, in survey, in site, and in the lives of families residing in homes handed down. This central rock knuckle that ever sits above the tide line points to what we have been and what we may become. When dealing with something this central, this primal, wisdom is needed. So briefly close your eyes and place one hand upon your heart. The health of the body depends on the health of the heart, its steady beat informing the whole. Now imagine your right arm swinging all the way to Gold Creek to the bridge, and your left swung wide to line up with South Franklin and the road to Thane. From this place, heart beating, the mountain to your back, and tidewater to the south, imagine sitting on Telephone Hill. Green trees, blooming gardens, children at play, birds at rest as neighbors tinker and build. It's a vibrant place to sit and to walk. Here, from this height, let this be the measure of who we are going forward. For the crowded summer sidewalks, they hold no place for us. Visiting tourists have swarmed them long ago. They leave with the fall, turning much of the city to a ghost town of closed shops. No one living here. But here,
You've turned your mic off again. You can't touch the base.
thank you.
Yep.
But here at this hill, there is a living example of homes preserved, gardens grown, life lived out. What harm would there be in restoring and repairing here? Preserving an example of how we live and how we make our way in this place. So beyond measurements of engineers and architects or mill rates and tax base, look for a new scale of value for this green treasure, ever in our presence if we protect it. A place that shows how to walk forward in a deep-rooted way. What harm is there in the partnership of restoration? High school building classes working in partnership with local carpenters, electricians, and contractors to restore historical homes? What harm in raising a new generation of builders and remodelers right here in our network? We have already paved paradise to put up parking lots. What will our legacy be, I ask you? I dare you. Go small, go green, go garden forward, and do not lose the green heart that carries our lives with it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Whitman? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony tonight. Next, we have Tony Tangs.
Thank you. Am I on?
You are. Please
I'm
say
Tony.
your name and area of town you live in for the record, and you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. I'm Tony Tanks, and I live downtown and lived on Telephone Hill for many years. That is, again, what I'm addressing you about. Aside from respecting its history and that charming green space at the heart of Juneau, my concerns have been with the process and the seeming invisible hands behind the scenes driving this redevelopment forward. I'm sorry. There are many states who are taking property under eminent domain for one purpose and using it for another is plain flat illegal. But Alaska may be like the Wild West and passively allow such dealings. Your legislative priority number 9, which got this started, had zero public input, either by committees or boards whatsoever. But now you're getting public input after you've gotten the horse out of the barn about what to do with the neighborhood. And I fear that process is skewed. Your July 26th open house survey said that none of the homes were eligible for historical recognition because they've been modified. Aside from stating a definitive none, which is a huge stretch, it conveniently overlooked the fact that some, if not all the modifications, had been made 50 years earlier, a fact which would further qualify them as historic, as established by the Historic Preservation Act of 1966. So that misleading survey definitely skewed people's thinking and responses, including some who wrote opinions to the Empire further spreading the misinformation in the paper. These surveys are important for our history and future and should be unbiased and true. And I can imagine there are some who might find such a conveniently casual approach to a serious survey worthy of being put to a legal test. Thank you for letting me speak. Thanks.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Tangs? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony tonight. Next, we have Callie Connerton. Please state your name and area of town you live in for the record, and you have 3 minutes.
Hi, thank you so much, Madam Mayor. My name is Callie Connerton, and I live in downtown Junaluska on Telephone Hill. I'm a local teacher here, and I have been a resident of Telephone Hill since I was born. Living on the hill for over 30 years, I've seen so many changes downtown made by companies trying to profit from tourists, outside developers who don't really understand anything about Juneau, and many rushed and expensive projects that don't serve the original goal or purpose, such as the former Pocket Park or the current park area at the bottom of Telephone Hill that was built with the new parking garage. During the last open house meeting, I asked the questions of the Portland contractors who didn't seem to know basic answers, and it made me really curious about how many important and basic questions and answers were not thought about during the design process. I brought up fundamentals, basics that maybe they don't know about, like snow removal and trash and fuel access, emergency access, keeping up with the area being so safe with the public transit office just right down there, and so much more. Adding more units and more needs without a plan in place in the designs doesn't seem like very intelligent and worthwhile spending-wise for the city to rush into. It's also hard to think about being asked to leave my childhood neighborhood and home and then have it sit empty due to lack of funding or votes when it could be housing currently, especially since there was no option for no development there. Juneau's Juneau. It's not Seattle. It's not Portland. It's a small, vibrant community of friends, families, and local businesses. Please stop trying to make it that by continuing to build over what makes it special, unique, and green. Plain and simple, this is being rushed. The process is not very clear, and the city needs to consider the long-term effects instead of just rushing in and tearing down history and building more things that don't necessarily serve all Juneauites. There's plenty of other places downtown, as well as all over Juneau, that are affordable, could build affordable access for housing, as well as that's accessible. The community doesn't feel like it's being heard in the sudden, impulsive process. Please, slow down. Thank you.
Any questions for Ms. Connerton? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony tonight. Next, we have Joshua Adams.
My name is Joshua Adams, and I'm with Friends of Telephone Hill. I come to you tonight to request that you do, as Doreen Lawrence with the Historic Resources Advisory Committee suggested to me, which is to parcel off the houses on Telephone Hill and sell them at auction with small plots of adjacent land. I agree with Doreen that private ownership is the best guarantee of maintaining each individual structure on the hill at minimum cost to CBJ. I would like to suggest that before any such auction, apply for the nomination of Telephone Hill as a historic district so that the proprietors of the homes may apply for federally mandated historic grants and tax credits only available to them in a historic district. As the old saying goes in Mexico, es el ojo del dueño que engorda el caballo. Nothing fattens up a horse like a watchful owner. Some things in government are best left to the private sector. And I believe that private owners for each of these historic homes will best serve to protect our cultural legacy, and the owners will pay property tax. I direct my attention first and foremost to you, the new Assembly members. You've been on for a few short weeks and you've already made some clear-headed, influential decisions. Good job. We're counting on you to think independently. We wish that our assembly would stop squandering our tax dollars on consultants from out of state and listen to us instead. We need an assembly that offers, seeks out, and administers historic preservation grant programs and low-interest loan programs for property owners, not an assembly that hires consultants from outside the state of Alaska at our expense to carry out renovation projects that we can neither afford nor want. As downtown property owners, we want to save the historic fabric of our community, but we need a pathway that allows us to do it ourselves. Let's work together parceling off the homes on Telephone Hill, and selling them as a plan that makes Juneau money and preserves our history all at once. I urge you to consult with Juneau's own Historic Resources Advisory Committee. They know what's going on. They understand and can help you avoid the pitfalls inherent in preserving vintage structures. Please make use of the resources available through the Anchorage-based Office of History and Archaeology to foster a culture of preservation right here in Juneau, and let's do it together. Thank you.
Any questions for Mr. Adams? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony tonight. Next, we have Shoshana Seligman. Sorry. Please state your name and area of town you live in for the record. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, Madam Deputy Mayor, members of the Assembly, City Manager, and CBJ staff. I'm Shoshana Seligman. I've lived in Juneau for 32 years. About 10 of those years, I've been a resident on Telephone Hill. I have 2 points to make, one of a personal nature and one that's more community-minded, and I've timed my testimony to be under 2 minutes to leave room for others to also testify. Going forward, before even addressing the residents of Telephone Hill, I would like to see CBJ decide on a plan for the Hill that has 3 components. 1, to truly take into consideration input from the public, from your public. 2, to have appropriate funding already in place. And 3, to have a plan that weaves Telephone Hill into the city's overall plans for housing. There are other housing projects such as Deckhand Dave's, Peterson Hill, Ridgecrest, Juneau Affordable Housing Projects, and the many abandoned buildings and office spaces that will all alter downtown Juneau's housing needs. For the sake of the newer members here tonight, please know that this very idea was wisely and succinctly offered by previous Deputy Mayor Maria Gladaszewski at an assembly meeting last August in 2022. My second point is that, to my surprise, in the context of First 40 Feet's community gatherings, I learned that Telephone Hill actually holds a special place of fondness in the imagination of Juneauites as well as tourists. It's important to others, not just the residents who live there. This is not unlike the way Alaska captures the imagination and also holds a favorable place in tourists' minds from all over the world. As you go forth in setting new priorities for our city, please consider the value of this jewel of a livable park, the green belt, and these historic homes. Please take the time needed to truly honor the inherent and intrinsic value to both locals and tourists of the Hill. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Ms. Seligman? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. We're going to take a 5-minute recess to deal with some sound issues on Zoom.
Just doing a quick mic check for those on Zoom. Can you hear us okay now? Okay, perfect. Thank you. We thought we had some issues, so perfect. Thanks. All good, Madam Mayor.
We'll bring the assembly meeting back to order and hopefully we have fixed our sound system. Next, we have Charles Van Kirk. Please state your name and the area of town you live in for the record, and you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. My name is Charles Van Kirk. I've lived in Juneau for over 63 years, and I've seen many, many, many changes, obviously, in that period of time. Our population has tripled. We've moved out to the valley for almost 2/3 of our population. There was nothing out in the Mendenhall Valley when I moved here, except a one-lane dirt road with turnouts up to the glacier. So that's where I come from. The changes that I've seen have been a bit disturbing, but sometimes we have to look at considering in progress. But in that, we don't want to lose our historic value. One of the things that I've always been proud of is that Alaska, the last frontier. Well, our last frontier has lost our courthouse that was up on just next to Telephone Hill to the state office building. We lost the state jail that was up there that, by the way, had a set of gallows out on the side of the building. When I moved here, that was still there because that was Alaska state law at the time, was that, there was punishment by death. We've lost a majority, or not a majority, but many of our ballparks to things like the federal building. Who remembers the Fireman's Ballpark right there where the federal building sits now? Our ballparks have moved, some of them completely out the road. Evergreen Bowl, which is now Cope Park, used to have a swimming pool. It used to have a ball field there that was used a lot. Still is used some today. We look at Treadwell. Treadwell was a place that I played when I grew up as a kid. We'd go and build rafts on Sandy Beach, and we'd look across Juneau. We'd look up and see the AJ Mine building that was up on the side of the hill. There's just a lot of history to Juneau that I'm really sad to say that my grandchildren will never see or experience. And I think that this is really an important thing when we come to Telephone Hill. This is an opportunity. If we, and I hate to reiterate some of the things that have already been said, but I really think that we should explore the possibility of applying for nomination of Telephone Hill as a historic district through the National Parks Service. This opens up a whole bunch of opportunities there. Once we get to that point, we could look at considering the establishment of a task force by the Assembly to explore the need for a historic preservation grant program and possibly a low interest loan program. I know some of those have existed in the past that the CBJ has participated in. This is something that we drastically need.
I need you to wrap up, Mr.
Okay, I'll wrap
Van
up by
Kirk.
saying that I would vehemently request that to table any decisions based on the recommendations of First 40 Feet, the consultant from Portland, that did not provide alternatives that were acceptable to anyone that I saw and listened to at the meeting that I attended. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Van Kirk? Thank you for your testimony tonight. Next, we have Skip Gray. Please state your name and area of town you live in for the record, and you have 3 minutes.
Hi, my name is Skip Gray, and I live out by Twin Lakes. And thanks for the opportunity to speak, and especially for 3 minutes. I spent all day trying to get it down to 2 minutes. We'll see how it ends up. I'd like to discuss a misconception being thrown around in the community regarding Telephone Hill. At the October workshop held by the city to gather the public's opinion about the future of the hill, one individual said that the only people who wanted to save the historic homes on the hill were the people who live there. And he implied that the only reason they wanted to save them was so that they could continue to live there. That belief was later repeated by someone else in an opinion piece in the Juneau Empire. It's obvious that neither of those people know how to count. There are only about 17 residents living on the hill, but there were about 50 participants at that meeting. And it was very obvious from the comments and the applause that the large majority was sympathetic to the desire to save either the homes or the green belt they are nestled into, or both. I wish you could have all been there to witness that. I've heard that First 40 Feet made some sort of a recording of the event. I hope that you can all listen to or view it. It should give you a realistic impression of the opinions of the crowd and their mood, both in terms of the wishes for the future of the hill and their opinion of the so-called public process. But that's a subject for another night. Just to give you a teaser, though, the crowd was so frustrated with the process that they refused to go along with half of the agenda, insisting instead to actually be able to speak their minds, an option that was never offered in the similar meeting held in July. But back to the main point. Another way to get a feel for the sentiments of the public is to search Telephone Hill on Facebook and examine the likes, dislikes, and comments. I guarantee you will see that a lot more than 17 people are concerned about the possibility of seeing the character of this historic treasure in Greenbelt destroyed. And contrary to another popular misconception, they don't all live downtown. I think you should listen to the residents of the hill. They are the ones that know how special of a place it is. I lived there for 10 years, 38 years ago, and it still holds a place in my heart.
Thank you.
I don't think it would if it had been a high-density bunch of apartment buildings. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Gray? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony tonight. Next, we have Michael Reeder. Please state your name and area of town you live in for the record, and you have 3 minutes.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm Michael Reeder, a resident of North Douglas. I've lived within CBJ for 25 years, on and off. My vessel is docked in Douglas Harbor and used for 2 businesses, commercial fishing and seaweed harvesting. I thank Assembly members Atkinson, Kelly, Smith, and Wall for hearing public concerns on the October 3rd reorganization meeting and voting against the unimaginative harbor rate increases. The rationale for this rate increase was lacking, and it's disheartening that the voices of hardworking citizens were ignored. Mr. Bryson's viewpoint of supporting the rate increase out of respect for Docks and Harbors' work is questionable, especially considered Docks and Harbors recommended doubling the dockage fees for large ships in 2021, only to spend more consulting money, $36,000 more, on studying the same issue. This seems inefficient, akin to a business that's spinning its wheels, and similar to the discussion around the newly furnished City Hall and also outside consultants for Telephone Hill. The new drive-down dock in Auk Bay is functional. The Statter Harbor breakwater is functional, although it's crowded by summertime mega yachts, their staircases, and their carpets. Yachts and transient vessels contribute to congestion and need to contribute more to the costs. Currently, a larger 300-foot yacht pays less per foot than a smaller 150-foot yacht, encouraging them to occupy space while waiting for their clients to fly in. Transient moorage is less than half of Sitka's. Historically, resident fisher people have reliably contributed to Docks and Harbors revenue, helping to fund the Statter Harbor upgrades. These projects have heavily favored the tourism industry. For instance, commercial fisher people face additional parking fees at Statter, while tourism businesses gain new parking adjacent to their new docks. CBJ needs to focus on completing the Aurora Harbor floats to generate revenue and reaching an agreement with UAS on the boatyard's future. Discussing the revitalization of Bridge Park to Norway Point and a new drive-down dock should only happen after these issues are addressed. The city should consider subsidizing Harbor Department salary costs, as the continued maritime heritage is in the best interest of all CBJ citizens. Tourism should also share these costs because cruise ships, whale watching vessels, and mega yachts in our waterways cause wake pollution and congestion, and it's burdensome to the commercial fisher people and resident boaters that live here. CBJ needs to find additional revenue and reduce the cost of living for everybody. CBJ should responsibly develop its land, its existing vacant land, outlined in the 2016 Land Management Plan, without annexations. Claiming CBJ land is largely undevelopable while funding costly dredge and fill harbors projects is inconsistent. Open market land, like near Fred Meyer, often gets developed despite its technical challenges. Consistently taxing fisher people for CBJ's grand projects will make the entire city a tourist-dominated area akin to a boater's Breckenridge, where the local economy is eclipsed by seasonal tourist-centric entities. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Reeder? Thank you for your testimony tonight. Next, we have Betsy Brennerman. Please state your name and area of town you live in for the record, and you have 3 minutes.
My name is Betsy Brenneman. I live downtown at 1703 Willow Drive. I would like to recommend that as you are dealing with downtown issues, especially housing, that the administration and the assembly move the process forward quickly for examining and hopefully adopting the Blueprint Downtown Area Plan. The assembly has been accused publicly of late for not being transparent and not listening to the community. In the case of the Blueprint Plan, in 2017, there was a year of an award-winning public involvement process done by local consultants that laid the foundation for the plan. 800 to 900 individuals gave input. In 2018, I was one of the many volunteers appointed to the steering committee to help develop the plan. Instead of the 1.5 to 2 years predicted, it took us 41 meetings plus focus groups over 4 very long years of hard work to write the draft plan, which was finished in January of this year. So that draft plan has been sitting in the libraries, but it has never come before the Planning Commission, let alone the Assembly. I believe Blueprint would be a big help to you, and it's a shame you do not have it for guidance. I'm proud of it, and the city should be too. It provides a renewed 20-year vision for downtown, and it is an action-oriented strategic plan as well as an area plan. It's a little different than some of the plans, and it was purposely meant to be that way. We agreed on 6 main goals, and the first was more housing of all types downtown. And we came up with 5 priorities for action, and the first was housing. As for Telephone Hill, the plan, quote, supports higher density housing that is integrated into the existing neighborhood, preserving existing historical structures to the extent possible. I personally would go further. I adamantly favor city involvement in preserving and revitalizing the historic structures, and I also support integrating a small increase in housing units in keeping with the Hill's historic character. I also favor the city becoming more proactive about a number of current structures, other structures downtown, some historic and some worth preserving, that could be converted into housing units. That's for another night. I believe the city can and must become much less timid about developing housing to ensure the character, vibrancy, and health of downtown continues. And that's still the heart of our community, as far as I can tell. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Few. Ms. Wall.
Uh-oh.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Ms. Brenneman. I share many of your concerns. I was on the committee as well and thought it was going to be a year-long process. And when I joined the Assembly, thought that it would be something that I approved early in my term, but here I am. My question, the last time the steering committee met, were you given an expected timeline, or has anyone told you at this point why there has been a pause?
Yes. I actually checked in with the Planning Commission because I had talked to Scott Chambor, and he said, as I've always heard for the last year now, mostly year, we finished it in January, but then it had to be formatted and put into final form. And I think that happened in February or March, right before Miss McKibben left, who, bless her heart, stuck with us. What I've always heard, it was turnover, lack of staff, too much work in the planning department. I've also heard that is plaguing the Planning Commission in terms of getting some basic things done that they are needing to do too. And as far as the timeline, we were all told, be ready to testify and be ready to talk about this plan within the next few months before the Assembly or the Planning Commission first. And we just never heard anything, any of us. And believe me, we put in a lot of work and a lot of hard thought. And I think you will see, if you haven't looked at the plan yet, some very direct and helpful suggestions. And I'm not going to get into this tonight, but I just think it's a shame that you don't have some guidance from that plan when dealing with downtown.
Thank you. Mr. Bryson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you for coming to testify tonight. I had a question. You said that the Assembly was being timid about housing, and I was a little surprised at that. I thought we had thrown the kitchen sink at trying to get every incentive and every lever pushed forward that the Assembly had at our disposal to get housing developed. But the impression that you've received is that the Assembly is being timid about housing?
I think the city's being timid. Maybe I misspoke. I can't remember what I said. I've lived here for nearly 50 years, and it's been the main issue downtown for 50 years. I'm not kidding. So I'm just saying that I think, and in fact, I was hearing on the radio the other day, there are cities now in the country that are actually buying people's homes because of climate change. They're moving people. They are doing something about housing in terms of safety, which public safety is, I know, a big thing. I think there are things that the city could be doing in terms of approaching some people who have the buildings that have been referred to tonight downtown that could be converted into housing that are owned privately, or in some cases seem a little bit confusing as to who owns them. Or anyway, I think there are some things. I will tell you also that when we were on the blueprint planning process, a lot of us asked questions, and the answer was, we can't enforce. We have one compliance officer. We don't have the resources to enforce some things when it came to buildings and land use and housing. Thank you.
Ms. Hale.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. All I wanted to say was thank you so much, Ms. Brenneman, for your efforts on that. And
Oh, you're
I
welcome.
really appreciate your testimony tonight.
It was actually hard but enjoyable at the end of it.
Thank you for your testimony tonight and all your hard work. All right, anything further on non-agenda items? Seeing none, we'll move on. So that brings us to the consent agenda. Any public requests for consent agenda changes other than ordinances for introduction? Any assembly requests for consent agenda changes? Seeing none, assembly action. Ms. Hale.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move the consent agenda as written, and I ask for unanimous consent.
Any objection? Seeing none, the consent agenda is adopted. Next, we're on our public hearing phase. First, we have number 13, Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is ordinance 2023-39, a non-code ordinance authorizing a cold weather emergency shelter at 1325 East Daw Way.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Madam Manager.
This ordinance exempts the use of 1325 East Dow Way as the cold weather emergency shelter from all the requirements and prohibitions of the Land Use Code for 5 years. CBJ has been operating a cold weather emergency shelter during the winter months since 2017 in partnership with various community organizations. The work of emergency sheltering presents numerous challenges that most communities only partially succeed at meeting. Ideally, proactive work and support services exist in significant quality and quantity to prevent the need for a true emergency shelter. However, like most communities, we are not there yet. Funding for these services has already been appropriated in the FY24 budget. The Systemic Racism Review Committee reviewed this ordinance at its meeting on October 24th, 2023. I recommend the Assembly adopt this ordinance.
Thank you, Madam Manager. We have some members of the public that want to speak to this. Karen Loffer. Please state your name and area of town you live in for the record, and you have 3 minutes.
Hello to the Assembly. My name is Karen Loffer, and I live in West Juneau. I am hoping that all of you received my email that I sent on Thursday. Thank you. And my concern about the cold weather shelter is a number of things. One, I am speaking as an individual who is a member of Resurrection Lutheran Church. I am not speaking as an officer or an official of the church. On October 8th, the congregation voted that we could enter into negotiations with the city with regards to operating the cold weather shelter for another year. Prior to the meeting on the 8th, on the 6th, I received a phone call from the assistant city manager who said that they were looking at Mount Jumbo Gym as an alternative. And as a matter of fact, when you drove by Mount Jumbo Gym that day, there was a planning commission sign that stated that the city was looking to possibly operate Mount Jumbo Gym as a cold weather emergency shelter in the event that Resurrection Lutheran Church did not operate it for the 23 to 24 season. And then all of a sudden we passed that, we had the operating resolutions from the church council. And the next day, well, it was actually because it was a holiday on Monday. On Tuesday, we found out that thing was going to be considered, or it was actually a go. We had talked with the assistant city manager months before, and they had talked about the possibility of Thane, but it had been ruled out. As such, now they're going forward with it. And our concern is, one is access. In order to get to the cold weather shelter, one must walk about 2 miles. Half of it is not lit. You can see the building from Thane. However, the slope is about 30 to 45 degrees in brush. So you can't get to it from Thane. You have to go down Mill Street. You can't get to it through the Alaska T-shirt parking lot because they have no trespassing signs posted all over. And there's a ditch between them and the cold weather shelter. So you have to proceed through the end of Mill Street to Eastaw Street, and you have two options, but both of them cut through the Alaska Coach. So the access with regards to it is what is most concerning. The other thing is there's 3 porta potties.
You have to.
Yes, there's no water. It does not meet code. The wall is not a full wall. And until the Planning Commission can see how they're going to develop that and the cost involved in developing that for a cold weather shelter, it's not workable.
All right, thank you. Any questions for Ms. Lawfer? Thank you for your testimony tonight. And we did get your email.
Thank you.
Next, we have Reverend Perkins. Please state your name and area of town you live in for the record, and you have 3 minutes.
Hi, I'm Pastor Karen Perkins, and I live in the Valley. And so I spoke to you before about this, and I hope you also got a copy of my email. I am extremely concerned about the injustice of the way this process has gone down, about the condition of the shelter that's been thrown up, and the safety of the people who may or may not be able to use it. I see here that in the whereases, it says this: the staff and community organizations began considering alternative options that met the criteria, but these criteria are vague and inconsistent with the criteria that were in the RFB. I don't know where those criteria came from. They don't have anything to do with national standards for low barrier emergency shelter. And then there's this emphasis again for it's not adjacent to a residential neighborhood and it's not adjacent to an elementary school, as though that is just something that we're also certain about. I mean, we're certain that it's not adjacent to it, but that's important component that nobody bothers to question it or check the data about whether or not that's valuable for either the people using the shelter or especially risky for those at the community. This it's not near a school thing is completely distracting because the emergency warming shelter doesn't affect the school other than sometimes schools do fundraisers for it. This process was a number of people were misled in the process. Certainly we were as a congregation. Oh, I'm from Resurrection Lutheran Church. I don't know if I said that. And this idea that nobody who's affected by this, none of the businesses that are affected by this in the area had any opportunity to be consulted on this. The way it just got slid through in between assemblies. And I'm sorry, I know you were brand new, but this happened as you were just coming online, and nobody knew, nobody got asked. And I will tell you, I've done extensive work in this area and extensive research, and what makes people mad the most is when they don't know and don't have input into the process. And then Karen already talked about the location, but I don't ask for gossip for the people who come and talk to me about the shelter, but I'm told no food, you have to go outside for porta potties, no water, no the shuttles may or may not be useful for people. Low barrier means low barrier. That doesn't mean I have to know what the schedule is or I have to know where to catch the shuttle, or the people that aren't using this are in danger. And I think that the news we got out of Anchorage this last week is evidence of that. That, you know, actually the article refers to a hastily thrown up or put up shelter that was available for people, and still there's not enough room for people. People can't get to it. They don't know how to use the system, and they did know how to use Resurrection. And the fact that this was an emergency that had to bypass any processes is completely misleading. It wasn't an emergency because Resurrection was available and we could have opened before the milk campground closed. And so this emergency was manufactured.
All right, thank you. Any questions for Reverend Perkins? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony tonight. Next, we have Leora Blackwell. Please state your name and area of town you live in for the record, and you have 3 minutes.
My name is Leora Blackwell, and I live in South Douglas. I have lived here my whole entire life, so I've seen this town grow and blossom, but that has also brought in a lot of homelessness and I worked at the warming shelter. But when this first happened, I actually went and got a lot of petitions. I have over 250 signed petitions to support it staying at the warming shelter. A lot of it was actually from a lot of the store owners that around downtown that were in favor of keeping it at the church because they were scared that there were still going to be people in their front storefronts and them not to be there during the winter to keep it safe. I really do feel passionate about it. A lot of the people that wanted to come here today that actually are participants and patrons of the warming shelter they also have a lot of mental illness and they did not feel safe or they did not feel brave enough to come in and talk. So I'm here trying to talk for them, and I know that our numbers were always high at the church, but that was because they felt a lot more safe. And it scares me knowing that their numbers are low now at the thing, because that means a lot of them are not using it. They're actually staying in the woods, and a lot of them have confirmed it to me when I worked at the food bank. A lot of them are like asking, is it going to come back, because we're staying in the woods, and it's not okay. And I think we need to be actually considering not just only the property, but we need to actually be considering the people that are having to use this and utilize it. We need to be keeping them safe and not thinking of them as objects and putting them in a warehouse, tucked away. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Ms. Blackwell? Ms. Wall.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Is it possible for us to see the petition?
It's for you guys. I actually have copies.
Okay. Would you mind handing them out? Thanks.
Thank you,
Manager.
All right. Any further questions? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony tonight. Next, we have Nicholas Barrett.
Hello, my name is Nicholas Barrett. I've lived here a little bit over 10 years now. If you remember from last time, I was a homeless veteran for a good on almost 9 years. Close to 10 if you were to bounce here and there. Like right when I got out, I went to college. So I used my entire GI Bill to go to school for 4 years to not even get a degree, just because I wanted to take all the courses that they had in general education. So I learned a lot from humanities and philosophy as part of my go-to courses, and I gained a lot of core values in the fact that no matter where you go, that homeless is homeless. There's not like origin of from that it's different. Well, wherever you, it's going to be. I travel a lot overseas and I supported a lot of stuff overseas, especially in Africa and in Europe. Brussels had a problem at the time, almost their gypsy. I didn't read too much into it, but it's sad to see that none of these people were talked to. Those petitions were the footwork that me and my Trevor went around and did. A lot of the people that I actually got along with at the women's shelter, you know, just putting in work, helping out those needed, most of it up and stuff like that, because cleanliness is very important. It's the food drives these people is another concern that I actually had a chance to go stay at that one shelter, and the whole spiel, much like staying at the halfway house. You go in there, you sign the paperwork, all the stuff with the fire department, the police department, just so they have all the legal stuff taken care of. But they're not even handed blankets. They get flavored water, a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. That's not a meal. I know the only thing that kept me going the next morning was at least having a hot meal in the belly at least once a day. And that's something that they're not provided right now. Nor is there running water, which we had a shower, so if somebody is filthy, at least they got a chance to clean up properly. And I just wish this would be looked into a bit more slowly, especially because we were prepared before the warehouse where money could have been saved, and we could have done it just for the year while you had a full year to, or at least just the winter season, to figure out some better place, or sort of beside the residents in church, because I know it can't stay there permanently, but it should take some time and a little bit more of a thought process. That's really all I have to say.
Thank you, Mr. Barrett. Any questions for Mr. Barrett? Thank you for your testimony tonight. Any other member of the public wish to speak to this ordinance? Seeing none, we will bring it back to the assembly. Mr. Bryson. Oh, wait, first, sorry. Does anybody have any questions for staff? Because I know Ms. Hale asked me, so go ahead, Ms. Hale.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would just, Madam Manager, can you give us a brief update on how the cold weather shelter operating at Thane is going, and how what that process is like right now?
Madam Manager.
Yes, thank you. So I spoke with a shelter operator, Mr. Ringgold, just today, and they, as of now, they're averaging 32 residents a night overnighting in the shelter, and that's a total of 107 distinct individuals. So the staff there does work. If someone has somewhere else to stay, maybe like another option, then they work on getting those people back into other options. And so that is part of the care that they're given there. Also want to address a little bit transportation. There's transportation from 8:30 p.m. till 1 in the morning. 2 staff patrol the downtown area and look for residents. So that's a total of 5 different, there's a total of 5 different loops that staff make. And because, you know, a lot of the residents are known, they can look for people, check in on them. Most of the ridership has been in the earlier roundups, and it does. There is more usership of the shelter when it gets colder. So we had some really cold nights a few weeks ago, and it got up to 42 residents there overnighting at the warming shelter. Did want to address the question of restrooms. Right now there are outdoor porta potties. However, we are looking at investing in some indoor restrooms. It just makes a lot of sense. Over the long run, that's a good investment if we maintain Thane as a cold weather shelter for a couple of years. And so we will be working on that this season.
Any further questions? Ms. Wall and then Mr. Kelly.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. You want to speak to meals and hot meals versus cold meals?
Yeah, you know, I do know that the bus does provide transportation to Glory Hall for meals in the morning, so that's part of the route. And I do know it's basic kind of there's basic food provided, so not hot meals provided.
Mr. Kelly,
I have a couple questions.
you get one right now because
Okay.
there's other people waiting.
Okay. Just following up on the transportation. I think it's good to see that the patrols helping to find people who might need the services. Um, are there any notices posted anywhere that can help broadcast the availability of these services anywhere that these people might frequent?
Um, I did not ask that question to Mr. Ringel. However, I did ask if there were kind of regular spots that people knew to kind of pick up the bus, because there is a schedule for the van that goes around downtown. And he said yes, that there are kind of locations that they regularly stop at, but they also look for people outside of those locations. So I don't have an answer to your question about posting notices.
Thank you.
Ms. Adkisson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Do you happen to know the difference in usership in the Thane Warehouse versus Resurrection Lutheran the last few years? Or do we know if there's less or more?
Madam Manager.
Thank you. So there was more usership at Resurrection Lutheran. I have heard that it got up to sometimes 70 bed nights. I don't know what the average is. I suspect the average was far less than that. But yes, more usership, as the pastor referenced in her testimony.
Ms. Hale.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Can you give us a brief idea of, is JPD doing more, more drive-throughs in the area of the warehouse? And have there been any issues there?
I haven't been alerted to any issues or concerns from businesses or in that area. So I don't have any. I know of no heightened activity in that area because of the shelter there.
Well, Hoganock.
Yeah, I see that the Systemic Racism Review Committee has reviewed this ordinance, but what was their finding?
So the process for the Systemic Racism Review Committee is to, if they have a comment that they want to forward onto the assembly, then they have a form that they fill out with their specific comment. And as far as I know, I know the no form was filled out to that effect because it's not part of your packet. I can't tell you what that specific conversation was because Deputy Manager Barr staffs that committee. I don't know if you were present at their review at City Attorney.
No, Mr. Kelly's before you, that we can come back unless it's a follow-up. Okay, follow-up.
I was just going to ask, I don't remember who the liaison is, but maybe, Ms. Hughes Kanji, she's not here either.
Sorry. Mr. Kelly.
Actually, Ms. Hale asked my question.
Okay. Any further questions? Ms. Wall.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I got the impression that staff have been talking to, service providers as well as CCFR, JPD, other departments as they've gone through this decision making to recommend the Thane warehouse. Will you speak to kind of the perspectives in the service, people providing services to these individuals about location and what you've heard?
Madam City Manager, sorry.
Thank you. Yes, CBJ has been in contact with the various organizations, ones that you referenced, and they have all been overwhelmingly supportive of Thane as a alternative.
Any further questions? Ms. Wall.
Mayor, just wondering if we could get a brief at ease to see the petition that was handed to us before we move forward.
Certainly, let's take 5 minutes. Okay, we'll bring the assembly back into session. Mr. Bryson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move the Assembly adopt Ordinance 2023-39A, a non-code ordinance authorizing a cold weather emergency shelter at 1325 East Saw Way, and I ask for unanimous consent.
Any objection? Wahalgadok. Do you want to speak to your objection?
Yeah, and I've heard both sides of this from friends and folks who feel very passionately on both sides of this issue. I think what it boils down for me is the unaccess or inaccessibility to running water, which is a basic human need. As I think about the way that this could have unfolded, in my thought process, it could have unfolded a little more strategically, a little more planning, a little more thought process into a way to treat human beings with basic human decency. And so for me, the way that this is unfolding and the testimony that we've heard and the petition that we're seeing makes it very clear to me that a lot of people aren't being treated with basic human needs. And so I will be a no vote on this.
Thank you, Wahalgadok. Did anybody else raise their hand in objection? Mr. Price.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, I do appreciate Wahalgadok's concern that we wouldn't want anyone to slip through the cracks. I'm a board member of the Housing First Glory Hall, and the Glory Hall's position is they could not be more pleased with the outcome of having the shelter a thing. They really appreciate the transportation in the morning. They're able to have contact with the people. They have had 0 complaints from their shared residents or shared users. And so the Glory Hall at our last board meeting was extremely pleased with the way that it has worked out, and they think that the transportation is working out well. And when I heard that they had no complaints from the people that they were in contact with, that was all I needed to hear, Madam Mayor. Thank you for the time.
Thank you, Mr. Bryson. All right, we have a motion and objection. Madam Clerk, will you call roll?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is for the passage of Ordinance 2023-39. Mr. Bryson.
Yes.
Ms. Wall.
Yes.
Wahalgadok.
No.
Mr. Kelly.
Yes.
Ms. Atkinson.
Yes.
Mr. Smith.
Yes.
Ms. Mr. excuse me, Ms. Hale.
Yes.
And Mayor Weldon.
Yes.
Motion carries 7-1.
All right, now we're going to take a 7-minute actual break.
I just went for cappuccinos.
Will bring us back into session. Item 14. We're not very far. Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is ordinance 2023-35, an ordinance amending the Animal Control and Protection Code related to service animals.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Madam Manager.
The CBJ Animal Control Code was revised in 2009 and included a definition for service animals. Since then, the definition of service animals under the Americans with Disabilities Act has been clarified by federal regulation. This ordinance amends the CBJ Animal Control Code to be consistent with the amendments to federal law. The Systemic Racism Review Committee reviewed this ordinance at its meeting on October 24th, 2023. I recommend the Assembly adopt this ordinance.
Thank you, Madam Manager. Any member of the public wish to speak to this ordinance? Seeing none, we will bring it back to the Assembly. Ms. Wall.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move ordinance 2023-35 and ask for unanimous consent.
Any objection? Seeing none, that ordinance passes. Item 15, Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is ordinance 2023-38, an ordinance amending the traffic code relating to impounds of vehicles.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Madam Manager.
This ordinance would amend Titles 72 and 36 to allow departments charged with oversight of public property to impound in place. Docks and Harbors has utilized this process with much success. This change lessens the burden on JPD officers and allows the city to respond to abandoned and junk vehicles in a more efficient and timely manner. The Systemic Racism Review Committee reviewed this ordinance at its meeting on October 24, 2023. I recommend the Assembly adopt this ordinance.
Thank you, Madam Manager. Any member of the public wish to speak to this ordinance? With that, we'll bring it back to the Assembly. Wahaga.
I move ordinance 2023-38 and ask for unanimous consent.
Any objection? Seeing none, the ordinance is adopted. Item 16, Madam Clerk.
Ordinance 2023-14, version B, and large letter N, an ordinance appropriating $50,000 to the manager for cruise ship scheduling services, funding provided by marine passenger fees.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Madam Manager.
This ordinance would appropriate $50,000 of marine passenger fees for cruise ship scheduling and port agent services at 2 CBJ-owned cruise ship docks and 1 lightering facility. Cruise ship services would reduce scheduling conflicts between cruise lines and ships to improve integration, provide greater efficiency, and enhance operations for the arrival and departure of the cruise ships visiting the Port of Juneau. Port agent services would include activities such as longshoring, stevedoring, and other generalized services to vessels docked at the facilities. These services would enhance visitor experiences, economic activity, vessel services, and the well-being and quality of life for Juneau residents. The Committee of the Whole reviewed this request at the August 7, 2023 meeting. The Systemic Racism Review Committee reviewed this ordinance at its meeting on October 24, 2023. I recommend the Assembly adopt this ordinance.
Thank you, Madam Manager. Any member of the public wish to speak to this ordinance? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to the Assembly. Ms. Adkisson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move the Assembly adopt ordinance 2023-14, version B, capital N, and ask for unanimous consent.
Any objection? Seeing none, that ordinance is adopted. Item 17, Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is ordinance 2023-14, version B, large letter O, an ordinance appropriating $300,000 to the manager for the Trail Improvement Capital Improvement Project, grant funding provided by the Alaska Department of Natural Resources.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Madam Manager.
This ordinance would appropriate $300,000 for the Trail Improvement Capital Improvement Project for the construction of Phase 1 of Juneau's first off-road vehicle, ORV, riding park. Phase 1 would construct 5 miles of trails through a 175-acre site contained within a larger 565-acre tract owned by the CBJ. It will likely take multiple years to build this phase, and subsequent phases will be mapped, planned, and permitted in the field. A parking lot and secure gated entry will be funded by existing funding funding in the CIP. The local match requirement will be met through previously appropriated funds in the CIP. The Planning Commission reviewed this request at the January 17, 2023 meeting. The Parks and Recreation Advisory Committee reviewed this request at the April 4, 2023 meeting. The Lands, Housing, and Economic Development Committee reviewed this request at the June 12, 2023 meeting. The Systemic Racism Review Committee reviewed this ordinance at its meeting October 24, 2023. I recommend the Assembly adopt this ordinance.
Thank you, Madam Manager. Is there any member of the public that wishes to speak to this ordinance? Seeing none, before I go to the Assembly, I just wanted to thank PRAC, Trail Mix, Gino Off-Road Association, and Southeast Jeep Club for all their work they've done on this ordinance. Mr. Kelly.
I move ordinance 2023-14BO, and I object for the purposes of a question.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly, and that's the right way to do it. What's your question?
I guess I was interested to perhaps from the city manager if what surrounding residents might have, what input surrounding residents might have offered.
Madam Manager.
I would love to invite Parks Director Schaaf up here to explain the process.
All right, thank you.
He did email me, but
Yeah. Who is now in dry clothes after he lost the bath battle.
But I'm clean.
Mr. Schaaf.
Thank you, George Schaaf, Parks and Recreation Director. Thank you for the question. So there's been a tremendous amount of public process on this project over the years. To the immediate question about nearby residents, one of the benefits of the site is that there are really no nearby residents in this area. It's a 35-mile Glacier Highway. So there's the nearest home is about 2.5 miles to the south, and then Echo Ranch Bible Camp is over 4 miles to the north. And the parcel otherwise really has no abutting neighbors except for the U.S. Forest Service. Nevertheless, when we did the conditional use permit, we did do abutters notices as required. We posted signs on Glacier Highway as we do for conditional use permits. We also, as a condition of this particular grant, in addition to the normal public process that we do, held a public meeting via Zoom at the time, and posted signage around town, also through our normal CBJ channels, and invited folks to participate that way. We did get some comments, really none specifically objecting to this location, and I can provide all those comments as well if folks are interested. But really, it has had remarkably broad support, and we really haven't heard any specific concerns from nearby neighbors about the proposal.
Mr. Kelly, do you want to withdraw or maintain your objection?
I do have one more question, if that's all right.
Go ahead.
Do we have any idea of the environmental impacts of the park?
Mr. Shaw.
Thank you for the question. So as a city project, we don't have any requirements to do an environmental analysis for a project like this. However, because this particular grant is federally sourced through the Federal Highway Administration, through the Department of Natural Resources, Recreational Trails Program to us, there are some additional layers of environmental review that we go through. So there's an environmental review checklist that requires us to consult with a wide range of federal and state agencies, including NOAA, National Marine Fisheries Service, Fish and Game, the State Historic Preservation Office, DEC. We also secured wetland permits from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, along with, and to do that, completed a wetland delineation. The grant itself, the grant agreement incorporates the categorical exclusion of the National Environmental Policy Act of 1970, which is kind of the lowest level of review. And it's really exists to facilitate projects like this, recreational projects, linear trail projects. And so it is as part of the grant agreement with the state. The state has a programmatic agreement with Federal Highway Administration underneath for that categorical exclusion, which extends to this project. So all that to say, it does meet the criteria for the CE, and we did follow the environmental review checklist for this particular grant program and consulted with a lot of agencies on the project, and none had any objections that we have not addressed.
Thank you very much, Mr. Schaaf, and Madam Mayor, I withdraw my objection.
All right, Mr. Bryson. Question answered. Okay. With that, we have a motion. Any objection? Seeing none, that motion passes. And it's a long time.
I'm sorry. I didn't have a question specifically, but I did want to make a comment on this. If you allow me
Certainly.
just brief. I just wanted to thank everybody, all the organizations that you thanked. It's been 20 years in the making that citizens could ride powered vehicles off-road. For 2 decades, it's essentially been illegal. So for us to finally put some money to it, this is a really big deal, and another example of something that this assembly has tackled and solved that previous assemblies have struggled with. So thank you to this group for that.
Yeah, it is indeed a long time coming. Ms. Hale.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you for that, Mr. Bryson. And if I could echo what Mr. Bryson says, I attended my first PrAC meeting, the whatever PrAC means. Oh, thank you. Anyway, this is an extremely high priority for the PrAC. They're really excited to push it over the finish line, and they know it's still going to take a long time because there's lots and lots more to be developed. So they're very happy about that. It's going to serve a segment of the population that a lot of the things that PrAC doesn't serve. So the motorized vehicles. Thanks.
Thanks. Okay. Item 18. Item 18, Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is ordinance 2023-14, version B, large letter P. An ordinance appropriating $28,000 to the manager for increased monitoring services at Suicide Basin, funding provided by general funds.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Madam Manager.
This ordinance would appropriate $28,000 for increased United States Geological Survey, USGS, monitoring services at Suicide Basin. The August 2023 flood event substantiated the need for advanced monitoring at the basin. This request would increase annual USGS flood monitoring from $7,000 to $35,000. This additional funding would contribute toward the installation of additional cameras and a larger stage sensor at Suicide Basin, helicopter time to access the equipment, and USGS staff time collecting and interpreting data. The Committee of the Whole reviewed this request at the August 28, 2023 meeting. The Public Works and Facilities Committee reviewed and recommended this request at the September 18, 2023 meeting. The Systemic Racism Review Committee reviewed this ordinance at its meeting on October 24, 2023. I recommend the Assembly adopt this ordinance.
Thank you, Madam Manager. Any member of the public wish to speak to this ordinance? Seeing none. Mr. Smith?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move ordinance 2023-14 BP and ask for unanimous consent.
Any objection? Seeing none, that ordinance passes, and hopefully they'll get lots of good information from that. All right, next we're going to unfinished business, and before we go to Madam Clerk, I'm going to go to Mr. Attorney, and he can tell us, especially for the new members' benefit, what this means. What is a reconsideration all about, Mr. Curry?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. So because Assemblymember Smith gave notice of reconsideration at the last meeting, we tentatively put this item on unfinished business to give it a placeholder. You can ignore it, but if somebody makes a motion tonight to reconsider, that would bring this issue live, and that would be a time for that. And it would take 5 votes for the motion to reconsider. And if that passes, then you're immediately in the position that you were prior to at the last meeting, which for this resolution means that the amendment has passed, and then you can figure out what to do next.
All right, thank you. So basically, we have to vote to approve the reconsideration, and then the vote we took before at our last meeting is nullified, and we start from scratch, just to reiterate what he said. So I'm going to you, Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a question. Is a motion to reconsider, is that a debatable motion, Mr. Attorney?
No, it is not, Mr. Smith.
The last item, I believe.
Oh, yes. Oh, wait, whoops, I looked at the first one. Sorry, yes, it is. Anyway. Mr. Smith, I'm still with you.
Yes, very good. Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move that the Assembly reconsider item Resolution 3040B, a resolution regarding the allocation of the hotel bed tax. Since it's a debatable motion, may I give my reasons for
Certainly.
Very
Since
good,
you
Madam
got
Mayor.
us in this mess, bring us home.
I hope to, Madam Mayor. Thank you. First off, the reason I'd like to reconsider is after hearing and re-listening to the debate, I hope to bring up an amendment to, should we decide to reconsider, to address affordable housing as kind of a general guideline or kind of a general priority for use of hotel bed tax. The main reason I want to reconsider, again, I believe that amendment should hopefully get us to find support on this resolution. Supporting the resolution will support a lot of work done by staff in the assembly on how we can get in better alignment so that our budget actually follows what the resolutions have adopted says, because currently we don't do that. Just doesn't happen due to, again, a number of resolutions and just kind of the factors in hotel bed tax and how they play out in those priorities. So that's what I'm hoping to do with this. I think it allows a better process for Travel Juneau. I think it continues to support the voters' will to provide tax to support Centennial Hall improvements, as well as Centennial Hall operations. And then it also goes to probably our top priority, affordable housing. Again, this resolution is just general guidance, provides really in the resolves, what we're going to do, provides general guidance to the city manager as they're developing the budget. We can change those numbers in the budget process, but I think it's important that we keep moving ahead for those reasons. So for that, I urge support of reconsidering the resolution.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Any objection to reconsidering? Seeing none, that brings us back to the time when we had a motion on the floor that was amended. And Mr. Smith, I hear you want to offer an amendment to the amendment.
I'd like to offer an amendment to the resolution, Madam Mayor, and it's amendment 2, and I'm going to distribute it here.
Do you have an extra copy?
Sure.
What do you guys already have?
Oh yeah, there may be some extras up there. Madam Mayor, if I may. Very good. Madam Mayor, a very simple amendment. It's essentially adding the words "and affordable housing" to the list of general priorities for use of hotel bed tax funds. We'd kind of decided to just, anyway, the resolution is guidance to the city manager, but it's general guidance. I think it allows them the flexibility to look at those funds and really look at different pieces of the budget, and provide anyway, I kind of talked about this earlier, provide the temporary tax to Centennial Hall, stable, adequate funding for tourism promotion, Centennial Hall operations, as well as and affordable housing. Hopefully again, we can decide those numbers during the budget process, but this provides general guidance with these words added to the city manager for these priorities for hotel bed tax.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Mr. Bryson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think I have a question that can maybe help, at least for me.
Are you objecting for purposes of a question?
Objecting for the purpose of the question. Sorry, Madam Mayor. I think this is for Madam Manager. Does this amendment, as you read it, would this be able to provide the stability and the consistent funding for Travel Juneau, or does this make it harder to provide stable, consistent funding for Travel Juneau if we go with this direction?
And we have Ms. Perry in the audience if we need to phone a friend.
Thank you, Assemblymember Bryson. So from my perspective, what this amendment does is it clarifies that one of the highest priorities for the Assembly for any revenue when considering hotel bed tax funds, our tourism promotion, Centennial Hall operations, and affordable housing. The reason for the resolution was really to leave that judgment up to the manager at the time of making the resolution as presented, was to leave that judgment of what the other items might be up to the manager at the time of formulating the budget, because priorities might change. That being said, housing has clearly been a high priority for a very long time for the Assembly, and I don't foresee that changing anytime soon. So a long way of answering, I don't feel like the amendment changes the original intent of the resolution and how I read the direction from the body on putting the budget together.
Mr. Bryson, is your question answered?
Yes, I'll remove my objection, Madam Mayor.
All right, so we have an amendment. Is there any objection to the amendment? Seeing none, we go back to the main motion as amended twice. Any objection to the main motion as amended? Ms. Wall.
Just for a comment, then I'll remove my objection. I just wanted to apologize to the body. Normally, when I object to something, I'm either, and I want something else, I should offer an improvement. Or if I'm just making a statement, then I should remove my objection. So I did not know that I was going to result in this failing. This isn't perfect, but it's better than what we had before. And thanks to Mr. Smith for improving this on my behalf. I remove my objection.
All right, any further objection? Seeing none, this motion passes. Good job, Mr. Smith, getting us out of it. So that brings us to new business. Ms. Hale. Oops, sorry, Madam Clerk. Number 20, Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Sorry, I'm getting back to wherever we were. Oh, I'm in the wrong meeting. Sorry. Here we are. This is the Hardship and Senior Citizen Disabled Veteran Nonprofit Late Filed Real Property Tax Exemption Applications.
Madam Manager.
There are 14 property owners that have requested the Assembly authorize the assessor to consider a late filed exemption for their property assessment. The Assembly should consider each request separately and determine whether the property owner was unable to comply with the April 30 filing requirement, AS 2945030F CBJC 6910021D. The burden of proof is upon the property owner to show the inability to file a timely exemption request. If the Assembly decides to accept one or more late filed exemption requests, those applications will be referred to the assessor for review and action. I recommend the Assembly act on each of these applications individually.
Thank you, Madam Manager. Ms. Hale.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The Assembly has reviewed each of these applications individually, and I move that they be forwarded to the assessor for review and action, and I will list the applications that we will be forwarding. So hardship requests, late filed hardship requests, Iona Manolakaki, John Sweeting, Michael Odap, Paul Simpson, Paula Terrell, Roy Carte, Verdi Brogdon, Monica Ritter, and Nancy Barnes. And late file senior and disabled veteran exemption list, Mark Riederer, Sana Eford, Stephen Eha, Donald Howell, and Randy Little. And I ask for unanimous consent.
Thank you, Ms. Hale. And just to be clear, and we should have done this before with the Assembly, for our new peoples, we are just saying that they get another try at it, and we're removing their, that they missed the deadline. We're not weighing in on whether they're going to get the exemption or not. And we should have told you that before. Anyway, any objection? Seeing none, they will go back to the assessor's office. Okay, next we have a staff report, and we apologize to Madam Clerk because we just ran out of time at our last meeting. So Madam Clerk, October 3rd, 2023 regular municipal election report. I'll read your line.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So once again, we have elected new assembly members and we have heard the will of the people with respect to our proposition on the ballot. We have a report in your, mostly a statistical, boy, I can't speak this evening, my apologies, report that provides just the nuts and bolts of what it takes to run an election. So we have in Juneau 27,767 registered voters as of the deadline to register to vote. And out of those, we mailed 26,425 ballots out. We had 9,435 ballots that were eligible for counting. And you have in your packet the full results as certified by the Canvas Review Board and myself. And I am happy to answer any questions that assembly members might have.
All right, thank you, Madam Clerk. Ms. Hale, you have a question.
Madam Mayor, thank you. And I have a couple questions, but I'll just ask the first one. Madam Clerk, can you give us a rough idea? I know that from speaking with you earlier, you haven't had time to do a complete analysis, but can you give us a rough idea of the cost pre-vote by mail and the average annual cost now, and give us just a feel for what that is?
Madam Clerk.
Thank you. Through the chair, Ms. Hale, in 2019 was the last time we conducted a precinct-based election. At that time, we were still borrowing the equipment from the State Division of Elections, and approximately $36,000 to $40,000 was what it would take to run a precinct election, having no investment in election equipment because we were borrowing it from the state. And then to contrast that, our vote by mail system we've gone through for the last 4 years, every single year it's been different because first we partnered with the municipality of Anchorage, but as I was looking at what the numbers would be, I don't have final numbers for this year's election, but we're in the neighborhood of $140,000 in our budget, with $40,000 of that going into what we call the fleet replacement. So it's being tucked away into future equipment purchases. So approximately $100,000 to conduct, 125 at the max for what it takes to conduct a by-mail election.
Ms. Hill.
Thank you very much. And you mentioned that we were using the state of Alaska election equipment in the 2019 election. And it's my understanding that the state of Alaska, when they replaced their equipment, they said that they would not allow people to borrow it. So we have had to have bought our own equipment for those 13 precincts.
That's correct, through the chair. Ms. Hale, in 2020, the State Division of Elections purchased all new election equipment, and it was their decision that all of the jurisdictions for the local governments that were borrowing their past equipment were no longer going to be able to borrow the new equipment, and we would have to purchase equipment in some manner in order to conduct our elections on the local level.
Thank you.
Mr. Bryson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just wanted to be clear. We settled and voted and determined that Juneau would be a by-mail election municipality. I've heard a couple of citizens say, why are we not approaching this subject again? So I guess my question, Madam Clerk, didn't we make the decision that we were going to be a by-mail election, and did we have any length of time on that? What would be the next thing that would cause this assembly to take up the discussion of by mail versus a precinct election? Because I thought this issue was already put to bed, but apparently a couple other citizens are wanting us to revisit this. What would it take for us to really seriously need to revisit this?
Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr. Bryson, thank you for that question. this year was the year that you guys adopted the election code to make vote by mail the default for all of our elections. We originally implemented a vote by mail type of language in the code in 2007. And then it was if the assembly by motion made a motion to hold an election by mail, we would hold one. That didn't happen until the 2020 year when the municipality of Anchorage offered up their services, and we actually got a pretty skookum deal because we didn't have to pay for their staff to help us run our elections. So that was one of our lowest years, was the first year we ran a by mail election because of the generosity of the municipality of Anchorage. This year you passed the ordinance making vote by mail the method going forward as a default. Should the assembly choose to change their mind in the future and go with a precinct polling place election, we would need to have enough lead time to be able to purchase and the budget to be able to purchase all new precinct voting election equipment, because we cannot use the vote by mail method if we're doing an in-person precinct method. So it's one or the other. You can't do hybrid of the both.
Mr. Kelly?
I'm not sure how you would get this information other than anecdotally, but because of the two locations that we had available for people to vote in person, were there long delays on election day? Were people still voting? If they were in line on time, were they still voting past 8 o'clock? And do you know how late?
Madam Clerk?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So yes, there were lines on election day. I believe anecdotally, I was given the information that the most anyone probably waited was about 35, 40 minutes. And no, apparently there were 1 or 2 people in line at 8 o'clock when the polls were closing. And of course they got to cast their ballot just like they would any other election day if they were in line at the time the polls were closing.
Yep. And having worked the polls before, if you have a long line, it's 8 o'clock, you go to the very end of that line, and that whole line gets to vote because they were there on time. So they aren't penalized for slow process. Okay, I guess we'll have to go to other questions. Mr. Smith and then Ms. Wall.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. I saw something written about how we rejected 168 ballots this year, and kind of anyway, saying that that's a downfall of, or a major deficiency of vote by mail. We used to reject ballots during in-person elections as well. Is that correct?
Through the mayor, yes, that is correct. Any question ballots and anyone who, if you showed up to a polling place and you weren't registered or you didn't have your ID on you or any number of reasons you were asked to vote a question ballot, there was always a number of question ballots that were also rejected in a polling place precinct. I did not delve into those numbers specifically, but yeah, it has fluctuated over years as to how many ballots were rejected for one reason or another.
Thank you.
Ms. Wall.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, staff, for producing this report. I felt like every time I had a question, the answer was in there, so it was really helpful and is always really interesting to read for me. My question is also anecdotal. In my mind, the assembly, when we just changed the code, we were making decisions to give people more options to enfranchise people. Have you gotten more feedback than normal, that having lots of options confused people?
Madam Clerk, did you get the question? Do you understand the question?
I understand the question. Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Ms. Wall. I have received some comments from some individuals that felt very passionately that the option that they wanted to use wasn't maybe available in the way they wanted to use it. But I did not, and from the input that I got from my staff, from the calls that we received at the call center, I did not get the impression that it was confusing once they spoke to an election worker and we explained all the myriad of options they could use, and then they would choose whichever one they wanted. Some folks were traveling on either side of us having ballots available, and because of where they were traveling in the world, which was off grid, they couldn't necessarily take advantage of it. But that's generally, maybe 6 to 10 people at the most every year. And that's been the case regardless of how we've conducted the elections. But yeah, for the most part, we would explain it to them and then they would figure out how best to do it for their particular situation.
Thank you. I have one quick question. We always get questions about challenge ballots. Can you talk about challenge ballots and how many were cured?
Sure. So in your packet on the second page, if you look at the back here, it talks about the reasons for rejected ballots, and this would be the reasons we challenge a ballot. So if somebody was not registered in time, if they were registered in another community in Alaska and not a Juneau voter, if they were on the ineligible list due to a felony conviction that had not been cured, if we had sent a cure notice because they were either missing their signature or missing their personal identifier or missing both of those things, we would send a cure letter. And if they did not respond to the cure letter, then we could not accept that ballot. We did have a couple instances, I think 3 instances where a power of attorney signed on behalf of the voter. And the process is that the voter still has to make a mark. Even if that mark is just an X, the power of attorney can sign as their witness and provide that. So we had a special process, a special needs ballot process for those individuals. We did have a couple that did cure their challenge ballot for that, but a couple that were rejected because they were not able to cure that. Any ballots that were received that did not have a postmark but were received after election day, those had to be rejected. So that would be another reason for a challenge. And then if we received it and the postmark wasn't clear and it was received after election day, we also had to reject those. So I hope, does that answer all your questions?
Yeah. And then the last question I had, because I had some people changed their signature over time and they were worried that their signature wouldn't match the signature we had filed. Is there a way to cure that before the election?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So yes, we highly encourage people when they are signing their ballot envelope to sign in the same manner in which they have most recently signed their driver's license at DMV, or their voter registration form, or their permanent fund dividend application if they submit it with a signature. Those are the 3 things that we're actually receiving and comparing it to, or on the last year's local municipal ballot envelope, because we are continuing to keep those signatures on file, so we will have more signatures to compare them to in the future as elections go along. But we did have a few that called us up and said, my signature, I've had some medical reason and my signature is not what it used to be, and how can I address this? And we would walk them through the process, and they were pretty happy to be able to walk through that process and get their ballots counted.
Okay. Any further questions? Okay, we just want to thank you, Madam Clerk, for the staff, all the Madam Clerks, and all the volunteers, especially a very young lady that I know very well.
And we have a great election team, and this really is a team effort. So I just have to say kudos to my entire election team because they did an outstanding job. Thank you.
All right, thank you for that. So with that, we will go to assembly reports. We're going to do something a little bit differently before we get into the regular reports. This is the time when we gave thumb notices And after hindsight 2020, that was a little confusing to everybody. So this time we'll just start, I'll start, and we'll just go down the row and we'll say what our thumb went to you. So you have a minute. Keep it short because we have things to keep talking about. So as far as I'm going, everybody's aware we had a record year and we could feel tension in the community. So, and we're hearing not just from locals, but from tour operators that we might be having a little bit too much. So my maintain was based on the fact that we will see lower rates with our losing our hot berthing and 5 ships on port. We're also working on Eagle Crest, so hopefully that will absorb some folks. So, and also looking at doing commercial trails. So I'm hoping with the infrastructure projects in mind that it will help with some of the mitigation. Want to support the tourism, but definitely feel the tension in the tourism industry, and I mean the tour operators. I'm not talking about the cruise ship industry. And just so people are aware, I'm not counting a 5th dock if it happens as part of our infrastructure. I don't consider that part of our infrastructure we're looking at. So anyway, that's why I maintain. And I'm also, before I go to Ms. Hale, Ms. Hughes Scanny's asked me to read a quit thing. This is hers now. In Ms. Hughes Scanny's words, from where is she? Lafayette? Something like that. We had a tourism task force based on a 1.3 visitation numbers because of the impact on the community. Then without any significant developments in managing those tourists, we went up to 1.6 million. The seasons get longer, the numbers grow, and the impact on the town is too great. If you're giving blunt direction on this point of grow, reduce, or maintain, the clear answer is reduce. So Ms. Hale.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So I voted to reduce, and I have heard from people I have never heard from in the past that this year was too much. People that really surprised me, actually. So my understanding from our tourism manager, Alex Pierce, is that 2024 and 2025 are projected to be approximately 1.6 million visitors. I believe that we are sending a message to industry that this year was rough. I understand what Mr. Bryson has said, that this was a rebound year. And I think that by sending that message now, we are giving industry the next couple of years at that 1.6 million to actually ameliorate some of those impacts and actually do something within the community so that we don't have bus issues, so that we don't have whale watching issues, so that some of those issues that came up repeatedly this year, helicopter noise, can be actually brought down. I'm not looking for huge decreases, but what I am looking for is knowing what tools we have in our toolbox so that as we go through these next couple of years, we can start to see if we need to take some actions.
Thank you, Ms. Hale. Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Appreciate having this chance to kind of dialogue on a really important and not easy topic. I said maintain because I had heard a few things during that discussion, and that's our peak days will go down, and that and I think industry and the community and we know that there are ways to better manage tourism. And I did say, as with my thumb, the caveat I had, which was assuming as we continue to aggressively manage tourism to reduce impacts on residents. I feel like the thing about tourism, it's not 1.6 million people in a year that causes it a problem. It's whale watching boats with too much wake. It's too much traffic. It's pinch points at Thane. It's those issues that affect your day-to-day life. It's not 1.6 million people. And I think a reduction in the peak will help. The mayor said a few things that I think will help residents. It will reduce their impacts on residents. But again, there's, the whale watching task force is working on some things. I hope they take significant effort. Traffic, we're looking at a circulator study. We have lower peak days. So I think there are things that can be done that will reduce the negative impacts on residents, and I hope we keep aggressively pursuing those. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Mr. Kelly.
Thanks. I think even with a couple, I agree. I was thumbs down, and a couple of you over here were thumbs even. But I think I have a lot of common points that I share with you. What I would like to see is a level of tourism that our infrastructure can handle. When I was knocking doors when I was running for election, I heard from a lot of people, talking about having trouble navigating downtown. I talked to families who depend on fishing for their livelihood, having difficulty going out fishing out of Stouter Harbor. I had residents who couldn't enjoy some of their favorite hiking trails because they were too crowded. I would like to see, I think, perhaps a reduction in cruise ship tourism does not mean a reduction in tourism overall. I'd like to see the presence of more independent travelers and a year-round revenue stream. I think we should not have be overly dependent on just one sector of tourism to our economy. I think we saw during COVID that can really hurt us. I think those are the main points that I wanted to make.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly. Ms. Atkinson.
Thank you. I was also a vote to decrease, and I want to echo what a lot of people have already said, that I heard from a lot of people that local impacts were really severe, and there, I think, was not so much the numbers issue, just that there's a capacity and infrastructure issue. I believe Ms. Pierce said there was something like a 30% increase, and that's just a really sharp increase for the amount of time. And so part of that is, of course, local impacts and making sure that, Juneauites are able to, enjoy their city year round. But I think it's also really important to look at the long-term health of the tourism industry, and we need to make sure that when visitors come, they're having a good time and a good experience, so that Juneau remains a place people want to come, and we protect that industry as well. So it's not a decrease forever, but maybe a decrease until we are better able to manage the numbers that we've been seeing.
Thank you. Walden.
Yeah, my decrease would have been probably a little more towards maintaining, but definitely a decrease from the congestion we saw this summer. And it was definitely felt by not only Juneauites, but also I had a bunch of friends getting off the cruise ships, and it was too much for them. It was too congested, and all of the good places to go, including up on the tram. A lot of people missed their rides back on their boat because the tram was so booked they couldn't get back on the tram to get back down. And the line, when I brought a few Hawaiians, we were standing in the line to get back on the tram to go down, and where we were standing, they said it's a 3-hour wait from here to get back on the tram, which is hike down. I mean, we didn't have to get back on a boat, but there were people standing next to me who were like 30 minutes away from their boat taking off. So, when we're talking about opportunities in Juneau, congestion is something that can be mitigated. Maybe like Ms. Atkinson said, not forever for a reduction, but at least for right now until we can get some of those other things set up and congestion a little more controlled.
Ms. Wall.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I voted thumbs down because I want to know what the tools are. We've always been told that we're behind the 8 ball because we have always been behind the 8 ball, and we can't just say 1.5 or 1.3 or, and make it so. So I just want to know what options we have for the future and that we can use when we need to use them.
Thank you. Mr. Bryson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. There are only two directions. There are only two things we can do. We can either be encouraging and supporting of the tourism industry, or we are discouraging, up or down. Those are the only two directions. We don't get to pick the limits of either one. You can say that we would, set it for a low limit, but if we're discouraging tourism, they will pick the lowest limit, not us. I'm okay with managing to reduce the impacts of tourism. And I think we're working towards that. As I was a member of the Visitor Industry Task Force, having boats that are here for longer because they're not hot berthing because they agreed to the 5-ship limit is then going to allow 4 times to go to tours instead of just 2. So not hot berthing is going to lower that intensity that almost every one of you mentioned. That is the thing that's impacting the visitors and the locals. No hot berthing, the longer days will create less intensity. Every tourist that we say you cannot come on this ship, the local operators the local business owners will be the ones that economically suffer. Not one cruise agency will suffer if we say, you can't do that. It will all be local operators that will lose out on those opportunities. And as a member of the Visitor Industry Task Force, we actually addressed what would restrictions on tourism be like, and could we legally do those? Mr. Palmer gave us 15 reasons why we are not allowed to put limitations on boats that come to our ship. And we had a very real legal reason that says you cannot reduce your tourism, you cannot impact your revenue stream while you have a loan out on our 16B docks. So if we even attempt to put a restriction in right now, we would be breaking the law because we have a loan that is tied to those tourism revenue. So I had a big old stay flat, which to me is good news because it means that the ships are full. It means that our tour operators are having a better chance at, or they're having, hopefully they'll have a better opportunity or better time fulfilling all the tour requests. They didn't have enough staff this year. They could not serve every tourist, and we discovered that. So we've been working on the Visitor Industry Task Force. We have legal reasons why we can't do it. Thank you for the time, Madam Mayor.
1 minute, Mr. Bryson. Well spoken, but 1 minute. Anyway, hopefully that gives Ms. Pierce a little bit better direction than the thumbs, and we have learned our lesson, no more thumbs. And less we're voting on what kind of pie we're going to eat for Thanksgiving or something. Yeah.
Noting for the record that Miss Pierce put a thumbs up.
Yeah. Yes, there we go. All right. So now we go back to our regular scheduled agenda. The mayor's report. I've actually been fairly busy talking to a variety of people, including several constituents that have come in and chatted, and we've had to problem solve for a few of them. So that's great always. But the most recent thing I did was I flew up to Anchorage yesterday to attend Vic Fisher's funeral. Double the people that they expected. I couldn't tell you how many people there, but it was in the hundreds. Very, very well attended. Many former legislators and current legislators were there, so awesome. And there's a film even out about him, and there's a book written about him. If you don't know who Vic Fisher is, please look him up. So, and to just summarize him, to paraphrase a quote he said, because I'm not as good as Ms. Hale at writing them down, but the best thing you can do for your community is vote, vote, vote. So I just wanted to say that. And then the last thing I wanted to bring up was a comment to the staff. I talked to some members of the Capital City Fire Rescue, and I would like you to look into a hiring position of a non-trained firefighter, similar to what the police force has. They can hire a police recruit, for lack of better terms, without any training, and then train them up. And we would like to look into how the fire department could do that, hire a firefighter recruit, and then send them through the academy and an EMT class. And that's what I have for the mayor's report. So we'll go to our committees. Madam Deputy Mayor, Committee of the Whole.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So the Committee of the Whole met on November 6th. We had a presentation on CBJ efforts to date on the Mendenhall River flooding, and I want to thank staff for the incredible work that they're doing, continue to do, and have done. We had public testimony as well. Some of that was wrenching. Hazard maps, we forwarded the ordinance to the Assembly, which was on the consent agenda tonight, to regulate avalanches, not regulate landslides. So we will actually, that will be set for public hearing on December 11th, and I'm sure we'll have a robust discussion about that at that time. We also had cruise ship tourism updates, and we did our little thumb exercise, which we won't do again.
Thank you for that. Ms. Wall, Finance.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I believe all Assembly members were at the last Finance Committee, but to recap
quickly, we forwarded a ordinance updating our procurement policies that was introduced tonight, and we talked through community grants process to be continued. At our next finance committee meeting, which is the 29th of November, we have it scheduled earlier than normal to be a few days before our retreat. So the focus for that meeting will be prepping for the retreat. So we're going to kind of go through last year and forecasting and all that stuff so we can get our brains ready to talk about the budget on Saturday the 2nd. And we're going to talk about audits also.
What fun. And Wahagadok did a great job chairing the finance.
Thank you.
Public Works, Mr. Bryson.
Thank you. We met earlier in November. We had the longest. Public Works met, I believe it was November 6th. We had the longest agenda that I think I've ever seen as the Public Works chair. We passed most of the stuff tonight, including the safety rails, which I think was the biggest topic. That concludes my Public Works report, Madam Mayor.
Okay, safety rails were just introduced tonight. Yeah. That might be, I was going to say, more to come on those. Lands, Housing, Economic Development, Ms. Scannies is out of town, so Human Resources, Mr. Smith. I don't think we actually have any appointments tonight.
No, we
But
don't.
We did have a good meeting.
We did. Human Resources met for the first time with the new committee this evening. We heard about a new process available to local communities where they can petition the Alcoholic Beverage Control Board for additional restaurant and eating place licenses. There was a big kind of alcohol rewrite that passed the state legislature, and that's a new power granted to local government. So we learned more about that. Asked questions and had someone from AMCO, really good. We heard from the attorney about an ordinance establishing a Juneau Whistleblower Act, forwarded that to the Assembly for introduction, and then had also forwarded an ordinance clarifying the process for electing an Assembly member due to a midterm vacancy, and forwarded that to the Assembly. So we will see those coming up. One thing I wanted to discuss, we have empowered board interviews for the Planning Commission and the Bartlett Regional Hospital Board. Those terms end December 31st. We have a set of dates to see if they would work for Assembly members. So if we can get our calendars out briefly, we are looking at the evenings of, hopefully it's either or, but December 13th, a Wednesday, or December 14th, a Thursday.
Starting at what time?
Hopefully 6, but if we have a lot of I'm definitely trying to get them done in one night, but sometime if we have a bunch of appointments, we may have to spill over into 2, but hopefully 6 or 5:30.
Okay.
Does the Assembly have a preference for either?
I prefer the 14th, please.
Okay.
I tried to say this during committee. The 14th is the evening for the airport board, but just to give you that.
I'm good with both dates if you're looking at me.
It was the Planning Commission and
Hospital Board.
Hospital.
Yeah. I'd say we can try for the 14th, and
Well, you talk with Mr. Kelly and Wahagadok after this, because if it's a personal thing for Mr. Kelly, then Wahagadok would edge him out because she's doing her assignment. And you'll let us know later which dates were picked. You might have alternative 1 and alternative 2. So anyway.
And that's all I had, Madam Mayor.
All right, so that concludes our committees. So we will go to liaison reports and comments and questions. Mr. Bryson.
Madam Mayor, I have no report this evening.
Ms. Wall.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I forgot to say one thing about Finance Committee. We may look at shifting the time earlier. Right now we start at 6. You'll see something in your inbox about whether 5:30 would work for you. Thank you. Madam Clerk has something to say about this.
Madam Clerk.
We have our photos starting at
Yes.
6, followed by Finance Committee. So if we need to adjust the time,
Oh, sorry. I wasn't clear. I meant for meetings going forward. So it does not have to start next month. Just recognizing that for staff, earlier meetings are better. Just wanted to see if for the assembly that would work too. But you'll have an opportunity to comment if that's not what you want. The next week we'll do it at 6 after photos.
the 29th of November, photo op. Be here, please.
Chamber did not meet this month because they're moving offices, but they have a retreat at the end of the month that hopefully I can go to. And Eagle Crest is my other board, and they met 2 weeks ago, and they got lots of stuff going on. I think we saw a little bit in the manager's report. They're actively recruiting for staff. They thankfully have gotten, between the UAS housing and J1 visas, have staffed up, and it's really what they wanted to express was really only because of those two things that they're in the position that they're at. They got lots of other stuff going on, but I'll save that for another day.
Yep. And there was snow on the ground when I left my house. Well, Hoggadah.
Yeah, the airport board, just to give a heads up that there was a long, robust discussion about the second crossing. They have real issues with any crossing that may interfere with airport traffic, which is probably not new to anybody here. But we should be expecting a letter coming from them that we will be CC'd on as the assembly. That's going to go to the folks that are organizing all of those conversations. And Commission on Aging meets this Thursday, so that will be my first meeting.
Thank you. Ms. Atkinson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. All three of my liaison positions have met so far. The JEDC just had a quick meeting where they were not many people present, so there's something to report there. In terms of docks and harbors, the main thing was the barrier on the docks that they forwarded, which we just introduced tonight. And, Commission on Sustainability had a panel for composting and discussing that. And that was the biggest thing. There was a lot of community input on that. So.
All right, thank you. Mr. Kelly.
Thank you. I wasn't sure how detailed to be on these, so my notes are probably more detailed than my remarks will be.
Good.
I think all of my liaison assignments did meet since the last assembly meeting. Planning Commission considered a conditional use permit for a new 6-story 72 multi-housing family development. They did not make a final decision on that. They're going to continue that discussion on December 12th. Tomorrow they're considering a request by Douglas Indian Association to build a learning center. They are canceling 2 of their future meetings, so they will not be meeting on November 28th because of a low caseload. And of course, December 26th would be a normal day they would meet. That's right after Christmas, so they're not meeting that day either. The School Board Finance Committee met on November 7th. We heard from one of the employees of their auditing firm, LG Rayfield. Their audit report is about 100 and it's almost 200 pages, and they reviewed it in about 20 minutes. So I did touch base this evening with School Board Finance Chair Muldoon. There were 4 findings, one of them having to do with changing of accounting standards, the other having to do with the City Charter Appropriation Authority, medical billing issue, and a student data reporting issue. I think I'll probably continue. There's a few other things, but I think we'll continue on with the Emergency Planning Committee. Tom Matisse talked about everything the city is doing in response to glacial outburst floods. The Red Cross talked about their Real Heroes Awards. There haven't been any heroes nominated in Southeast Alaska in a long time, and nominations close on the 11th. So I would, if you can think of any first responders or good Samaritans, you might look at their website for the criteria for those. The most of the meeting came from Pat Dreyer from Department of Transportation and Public Facilities, talking about their drone program. The LiDAR maps that they produced of the Mendenhall Valley, they are now available to the public. They're using the drones for advanced avalanche mitigation. They're even considering getting the permits to attach explosives to these drones, which I thought was interesting. Yeah, I think that's it for my liaison assignments.
Thank you, Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. School board met with the new school board, swore in new members the day after our meeting, and then they also elected their new slate of officers. They elected Dee Dee Sorensen as president, Emma Mackey as vice president, and Will Muldoon as clerk. Some updates: enrollment is down 82 students below projections. That, coupled with some of the notes Mr. Kelly mentioned and some of the audit findings and others, they are definitely expecting an experience. They're going to have to deal with a $2 million-ish budget deficit starting this year off. So some challenges for them ahead. But they meet tomorrow, and I will give a report on that later. Thank you, Madam Mayor. They meet at their work sessions at 4:30, and their meeting is at 6.
Okay.
I believe.
Ms. Hale?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. On the 1st of November, I represented CBJ at the Heritage Way renaming. So that was really delightful, actually. Thank you, Madam Mayor, for asking. As I said earlier, I attended the Parks and Rec Advisory Committee. We talked about permits for non-commercial uses. This is complicated. That's being held over a new naming policy, which I had some comments on, and I will have comments on if it gets to the assembly. When it gets to the assembly, but that too was held over. They're going to act on that in December. CIP list, that's where the conversation about the off-road vehicle park came up, and they worked on prioritizing their items for the CIP list. And legislative capital priorities list as well. They worked hard on prioritizing that. It was a good meeting. It's a great group. I know some people have been liaisons and have liked it too.
Thank you. And just quickly, because I just remembered with the Lands, Housing, and Economic Development, they got the report back from the Affordable Housing Fund Committee, and there was 2 projects that rose to the top. And during that time, Mr. Smith put forth an appropriation ordinance for, I think, 1.6-ish million to add more money to the fund so that we can do both those 2 projects. So you'll see that ordinance coming before the assembly here shortly. And then the Alaska Committee would be remiss if I didn't remind everybody legislative reception will be January 16th. So with that, we will go to continuation of public participation on non-agenda items, but I don't see anybody raising their hand and no one signed up. So we'll be going to executive session, but Madam Clerk has got her mic, so she might want to say something.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So I would just let our watching audience know that once you go into executive session, we're going to be ending the meeting at that point on the recording and on Zoom, and they're going to kick the rest of us out of the room, and Mr. Attorney is going to stay in here with you.
Okay. All right.
Doesn't someone have to make a motion?
You do. No, actually, who did we decide that was going to do that? Mr. Bryson, was that going to be you? That was going to move us in and out of executive session now?
I might be. Was I not the executive session person?
Ms. Hale has the word, so we'll do Ms. Hale tonight.
I move the assembly into executive discussion to discuss matters the immediate knowledge of which could have an adverse effect on city finances, specifically a litigation update.
Thank you, Ms. Hale. Is there any member of the public that objects? Seeing none, is there any member of the assembly that objects? Seeing none, we will move into I can't speak either. Executive session.